adjust a few things and then I'll get started. some early morning sirens. Or just sirens wherever you are. How's it going, Benjamin? Hi, Philip. No worries, Nolan. Thanks for stopping in. Since we're past the hour mark, I'll go ahead and start talking a little bit. What I'm doing right now, I have a Pentel Graph Gear 1000.3, and I'm starting to go in and add a little bit more of a definitive line in any of the shadows. I use this because it gets between the strokes of the larger pencils that I've been using, so it kind of effectively smooths it out and makes it look a little bit more like the reference photo, because to me it looks like it's on Ilford HP5, so it's a black and white film stock, and it's not super high def, it's a little bit softer. If I had to guess, it's probably on a 50mm lens, the photo I'm using. As far as this drawing goes, I'll be totally honest, I'm not really pleased with it, but I would rather have a finished failure than skip to the next drawing. And I mentioned this yesterday, but I've had some drawings like this before where I was about 90% convinced that it was not turning out how I wanted until the end. And then some of those other ones ended up being a lot of people's favorites. So just kind of trusting the process and powering through. And as per usual, I start talking and people leave. So, see ya. I'm not going to get too much into the hair just yet, but I do want to start framing out some of this with a little bit more contrast. Get the weight of the drawing kind of in the center a little bit more. My goal is usually to draw the viewer's eyes to the eye line of my portraits. Speaking of viewers, I went to experimental film theater last night and was thoroughly grossed out and uncomfortable by a bunch of stuff. It was a fun San Francisco experience. The one person in the room that I wasn't related to that clung to me to speak to me a lot said something wildly inappropriate that filled my head with imagery I'd love to delete. I think old San Francisco hippies are kind of just that way. But going to events like that kind of both encourages and discourages me when I'm thinking about projects. Because the things that people submit to those, or that they bring under the pretense of it being like art with a message, is shocking. There was some good stuff. There was a really cool documentary about how they make indigo naturally, like a dye for cloth. And that was really well made. I couldn't remember who made it. And then I guess like a somewhat celebrated independent filmmaker and writer, whatever, she had a lot of titles. Lynn Sachs was there, and some of her stuff was really interesting. But it did start to kind of feel a little bit like anytime they're trying to portray like overly artsy people in like a bad sitcom or a show like that, it started to reek of that vibe. Like a slam poetry thing. A lot of people were snapping into it instead of clapping. Which I think it kind of like affirms how I feel about not just galleries specifically, but creative spaces like that where people show films and read stuff. it all kind of turns my stomach a little bit. Like I'm I think happier to create at a distance and let people view it without me being present. In the same way that I don't know that people who are writers should actually read their work out loud to people. I think there's also a lot to be said for how much like a good melody or good chord progression masks really poorly written words, because watching people read from like excerpts from their book is kind of the same, at least with that kind of writing. No offense to the people that read, not like any of them are watching this, but it was sort of like listening to someone read awful lyrics without the context of music. Which normally I'd be a little bit kinder about that type of stuff, because art is art, whatever, but there was kind of like a arrogant smugness to the whole room where a lot of people were, as soon as they realized you weren't going to ask questions or compliment their film, they kind of looked around like they wanted to talk to someone else. And then the same sort of older hippie lady that said some pretty nasty stuff to me chastised me for looking at my phone. To be fair, I get it. I wasn't looking at it during the shows. It was after the whole event was over. And instead of walking around and talking to people, I was checking my phone to see how my family was. But there's something about that crowd that makes me want to create in isolation. I think also like it's the whole idea of like talking about what you do versus just doing it is something that always rubs me the wrong way. That's why I don't often talk about art unless people have questions or it's just something basic that I'm talking about, like a technique. But whenever people start talking about process with anything, whether it's art or acting or music or writing, or maybe the worst is talking about the comedy process, it's like, this is the snake's eating itself. You gotta either be funny or don't, but don't explain why it's funny. It's for that same reason that I'm not sitting here talking about like my process with art. You know, maybe it's like the southerner in me that I don't want to hear about it. Maybe it's just me as an individual. I don't really know what I can attribute it to where I'm from. But last night, the closest comparison I could give is like a slam poetry reading. It was kind of that vibe. And then I failed to bring cash, so couldn't even get a drink because it was a cash only kind of spot. I will say though, I've been to that theater before, and there's a lot of like really passionate people there, and respect. I'm happy that they all have a place for what they are doing, and it's been there for a long time. I think they said it was 38 years old. But the last one that I went to had a lot of like more experimental films, like lots of shrieking and terrible found footage, and I don't know, it's just not my genre. It's the same thing as modern art. When I go and look at like MoMA, and everything is just sort of like a watered down Jackson Pollock with like a really big mission statement on the wall about what inspired them to create a paint splotch on a giant canvas. Which I think, like, by those standards, most kids should be displayed in, like, their art should be displayed in museums. I've seen like more impressive stuff, just like from my kid creating art. I'm more of like a fine art fan if I go to a museum or a gallery. Like, I want to look at something and wonder how they did it. I don't want to look at it and read the mission statement next to it about why it represents pain for some place. And I think it's kind of the same creative thought line of people that take photos that don't know how to operate their cameras, and then they hide behind like, well, what I was trying to capture. It's like, well, learn how to use your camera first, then try to capture. Like, I'd rather go look at documentary photos of like war-torn countries or something where there's actually like a representation of something real and not some perceived nonsense. Which I think it maybe like that type of appreciation is genetic, because my brother loves modern art. And, like, I think the only overlap we have there is I like the Rothko Chapel in Houston. And like, Rothko's cool, but I don't know. Like, there's only one Rothko. It's just like there's only one Basquiat. Like, anytime I see people painting in that style and they pretend like it's their own, it's like, is it though? Or is it just that you saw some Basquiat and you thought you'd do it and nobody would recognize that you stole it? I think that it carries over from like my experience with music as well. Like, playing music for a living, I listen to a lot of bands that when they did interviews, they'd sort of have like a story they'd tell about where their sound came from. But if you listen to them out of context, you just listen to the music, it's like, well, your sound came from the Beatles, who doing 3 and 4 part harmonies and dipping out of minor major walk downs, and you know, like, when it's that obvious, I wish bands would just say, like, we love the Beatles, you know. Or if your band sounds exactly like the Beach Boys, just say you love the Beach Boys. Like, that's Jose Gonzalez is in like my, I'd say like top 20, which sounds like a lot, but I like a lot. If you don't know Jose Gonzalez, he's also in the band Junip. He does kind of like a detune, sort of non-standard songwriting. He's had a lot of good placements. You've probably heard it in movies or shows, but he and I were back to back in an interview series years ago at ACL. And the interviewer ended up pairing our interviews together, even though I was in a different band. Because we both, without knowing it, suggested, like, we had to pick our favorite song or album or music movement. We both said the same thing without knowing what one another was talking about, which was Nick Drake, Pink Moon. It's another great album. But Jose Gonzalez is clearly influenced by Nick Drake, and he just outright said it. He was talking about how his music wouldn't be what it is without Nick Drake, instead of pretending like he didn't know who it was. Another good example of that is like Leon Bridges. We used to run in some of the same circles in Texas and have like a bunch of mutual friends. I know a lot of his old bandmates. And early days, he was doing an interview and they asked him how much of an influence Sam Cooke was on him, and he pretended like he didn't know who Sam Cooke was, even though he's dressed like him, is trying to sound like him, and was literally taking photos that are like mirror images of Sam Cooke's album covers. It just like stunk of like, I don't know, wanting to be seen as an artist instead of just saying like, oh, I'm obsessed with Sam Cooke, he's great. Like, I'd rather someone just be outright about what they like and why they create exactly like that thing. Which, to be clear, I don't think Leon Bridges is even remotely in the same category. You can't even sing harmony. When he has people on stage with him singing harmony, they're always singing in unison on the same notes, which blows my mind. But I I think there's like a thing that I hate about like meeting people that are genuinely creative. Like, I wouldn't throw the term around loosely, but I've known a few creative geniuses, people that can't help but to be creative and were adept in all of their fields. And you hear them talk about it, and the last thing they want to talk about is their work or their process. They just create. Like Daniel Johnston's a great example. It's hard to get a logical answer out of him in general, which I've met him a long time ago. If you don't know who that is, he's the guy that created the "Hi, how are you" sign in Austin. He's got a lot of really interesting music and writing and stuff like that. But he's from a similar place to where I'm from in West Texas. And he just happened to be in a gas station when I was working a job out there. And he was holding like Mountain Dew and a bunch of like candy and gas station snacks, and I paid for it. And then he stared at me awkwardly, and I told him I liked his music and that my brother was obsessed with him, and he just kind of stared and said thank you and then scurried out. But I don't know, I challenge you to find a video of him explaining his process. It's just weird. Just that shit, you know? I think it's like the thing of like wanting to be seen as something versus just being something. It kind of goes back to that whole "you'll know them by their fruits" type thing. I think the art kind of speaks for itself, whether it's music or photography or whatever. Like locally, my favorite photographer in San Francisco is Jake Ricker. And we've talked a few times. I've drawn him before and talked about him shooting some video photos for our wedding and stuff. And anytime I talk to him, we talk about music or TV. We don't talk about photography. So that's what he does all day. So it's kind of like not exactly what you want to talk about with people, even when you're at like a photo gallery. Same as like when I was in bands. I rarely talked about music with people. I talked about what shows we were watching, or people wanted to know what kind of video stuff I was doing. I think the majority of the time, everyone was just sort of looking for a good joke to make everyone laugh in the green room. And usually once people started talking about music or process or anything, I found an excuse to leave. Speaking of leaving, it looks like I've chased everyone out but one, so farewell. But it's my show, so I might keep talking. So I'm not really pleased with how this is turning out, but like I said before, I'm just going to commit and finish it, have a finished mess instead of bailing on it. Which is okay, that happens from time to time. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I was talking through the initial sketch phase. It probably would have been better to focus a little bit more, but that's alright. Still going to be on every day for a while. Anyway, back to what I was saying about last night. The films that we watched, there were a couple good ones. There were some like really sweet ones with cool footage and interesting stuff. A lot of heavy-handed things, though. It's not really my thing. Like, I almost had to come home and watch something stupid to cleanse the palate of being over-arted. I feel like I am basically just sitting there talking to myself. There's nobody in the chat, really. I'm starting to wonder if these morning streams are just not the way for gaining more of a community, because my evening streams seem to have a lot more viewers. But I'm going to stick with it at least until the 19th. Or the 18th will be the last day that I stream for a little bit. Got some travel coming up. Hopefully, if we can get there. We'll see if the airlines are alright. It's about to be noisy. One of my neighbors is coming down the stairs outside. So if you get the volume up, watch out. More on what I was saying before about people who are just naturally creative and don't really think or talk about process. I find that they usually have the more universally accepted products, like whether it's art or photography or music especially. I used to play and tour with this guy. His name was Levi. He's like a very close friend, brother to me. And he was one of those guys that was just kind of intuitively creative. He didn't really have to think about it. He just could sing and play and write really well. Was really well read. And definitely a very weird guy. But we were doing an interview one time, and this is a long time ago. It was before podcast existed. It was a radio interview. And we were talking about unreleased music that we had. And then the person complimented his writing and kind of described what he thought of Levi's writing, sort of fishing for him to elaborate on his process. And Levi just waited for about 15 seconds and then said, okay. And then they changed the subject. And it kind of is, I think that informed how I feel about a lot of that stuff as well. Because for him, it wasn't about the process. That's his own, it's like talking about reading. It's like, just go read. Unless you're in a book club or someone's asking you. No one wants to know about it, you know? But even then, like if I've ever talked to anyone about reading, I find that in that conversation, they're just waiting to give you a book recommendation and tell you what you should read. They don't really give a shit about what you've read. Same with music. I have kind of a firm rule that's, I didn't even really think about it, it's just a natural thing. If someone tells me I have to listen to something, I won't. Same as if somebody tells me I have to watch something. There's movies that I'd probably enjoy, but because of the person who told me I should watch it, irritates me. It's like I can't detach it from that recommendation. I don't know, I think it's probably a product of being in a middle slot band for so long. There were at least 2 other bands that we didn't really want to hear that played every night. You just get tired of everyone, oh, you have to listen to this. You haven't heard this, you have to listen. It's like, ugh. Talk about something else. I think that's also why, like, when people ask me what photographers or artists I like, I have a few I can rattle off, but for me, really, it's, I just like what I like. I don't feel like I need to talk about it and make it part of my personality. I mean, I think it's true with any subject, really. Most people are just waiting to speak. rare to find someone that actually listens well, or that can have a conversation, like a true back and forth. I'll close my window real quick so it's not to get loud. This looks like a little island on his face, but it's actually a scar. Along with those types of like sort of unspoken rules, I have a thing about people who sing about singing. Can't do it. If you're singing about playing guitar, there's a couple exceptions to that. Like there's a Ken Pomeroy line that I don't mind. To be fair, she's like early 20s, so I get it. She's talking about loving her guitar, but it's within the context of a song about gifts. But I can't really listen to people singing about singing, which is kind of like a modern country trope. I don't know, there's something about that. It's like, I don't know what it is that bothers me. I guess it's the fact that you're already singing. Like if you're singing about what you're doing, maybe you should have like more hobbies. Like, I don't know, I'm more of a fan of a narrative in a song, like an actual story being told. I kind of feel like that holds up as well. Like if I'm reading a book and someone's writing about writing, I can't. It's here for the stories. Sounds like they're done making noise. I'm gonna open the window up. That's more noise. In case anyone's volume is up. So I think sometime this week I should be able to get my, my new portfolio is going to be in from Paper Republic. And I think once that shows up, I'm going to start doing multiple series throughout the week. So like right now I'm drawing some of my favorite musicians in series. And I've got a list that I'm working off of to kind of have sort of like a finite number of these. And then in my other portfolio, it's an A5, so it's smaller than this one. I'm going to work on some other unrelated series. I can't say that I will draw what you suggest, but if anyone has suggestions, go and comment pretty much on any of my videos, and if I like them, I'll add them to the list. But right now I'm kind of just trying to do series of writers, musicians, people that I've listened to or been influenced by over the years. But keep in mind, if you're suggesting stuff, I'm talking about suggesting people to draw that are going to be drawn in this exact style. So I'm not looking to draw anime or different, anything like that. I don't watch cartoons. I'm nearly 40, so, you know. But I've thought about a few different series, maybe like historic figures. I've already drawn a lot of my favorite writers. And the last series before this was actors that I liked. And of course I draw more personal stuff like gifts for family and friends, but I typically do those in a pocket size. So I have a whole stack of those that I need to finish. But if these lives or any of my channel stuff ever gets any traction, get a little bit more of like a frequent engagement, I might start doing like once a month I'll draw someone comments. Probably in a smaller size. Like something that I could do in 1 hour. So far in this series I've drawn Willie Nelson, Jimi Hendrix, and now a young Tom Petty. I got quite a few more on this list, so I know there's a guy who keeps asking me to draw Jim Morrison. Sorry for the plane noise. To be honest, I will draw Jim Morrison, but it's not high priority. I'm not really a Doors fan. There's another YouTube guy. I wouldn't describe him as a friend, but someone I know. Acquaintance, I guess. We have a lot of mutual friends. And his name's Pat Finnerty. I've done some animation for him before. And he has a rule about the Doors once a year. I kind of feel the same way. There is such a thing as too much of whatever people can see or consider a good thing. I like the music of the Doors. Jim Morrison rubs me the wrong way. He's sort of there's the Lester Bangs quote that they used in Almost Famous about the Doors, and I kind of agree with that wholeheartedly. So not kind of, I definitely agree with that wholeheartedly. Which Lester Bangs said, he's comparing the Doors to, I think it's White Light, White Heat. I can't remember the exact band, but he said they're drunken buffoons, which makes them poetic. They have the courage to just be drunken buffoons. And then says that Jim Morrison is kind of the opposite of that. I'm butchering that quote, but let me look it up. Oh, he's talking about the Guess Who. That's right. So the actual quote is Jim Morrison, he's a drunken buffoon posing as a poet. And then he said, give me Guess Who. They've got the courage to be drunken buffoons, which makes them poetic. Which kind of sums up what I was talking about. So I feel like some people are kind of parading as creatives. Whereas there's people who are just genuinely creative. And I'd rather be into that kind of stuff. I think I've just spent one too many days with people that are trying to figure out how to be famous or successful and pretending to be like creative all the while. It's actually why I quit touring. It wasn't really, I mean, I stopped for a while when I had a kid, but I was traveling with people that couldn't just be honest about anything really, but they're sort of like lying to everyone about how they just love the grind of touring, but then behind closed doors they just talk shit about everyone who's doing better than them. So if you can't have like joy and happiness for people that are your contemporaries or maybe who are like surpass them professionally, can't imagine that they'd find any joy in what they do either. But the way that they talk about process and all that, they actually sell classes on how to be successful just like them. Step 1, have rich parents. Step 2, lie to everyone about how you make your money. That's pretty much their class in a nutshell. If you dig around enough, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I don't want to just outright say their names. But old bandmates. I'm sure a lot of people click on this expecting me to either be doing ASMR for drawing, which I've explained before. We live in such a noisy area, I don't ever want to market it as that, because I feel like it would be like false representation. But I see these more as like what it would be like if you're sitting with me at a cafe. I'm talking about all the stuff I'm interested or not interested in, and you're just whoever's at the table next to me. Other than just being like incredibly bored and kind of redundant. It's mainly why I don't talk about art the whole time. Any of the 4 people watching have any questions? guess that answers my question. I'm probably going to hop off at the 2-hour mark because I want to go and have a little bit of a day. So I got about 10 and a half more minutes. I've said this in every other live stream, but I will be live daily, at least until the 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, which is on the West Coast in America. All of these lives get archived. I do not archive the chat, but if anyone wants to go back and draw along or figure out what I was talking about, they're all going to be in the live drawing playlist or just in my live archive. And then when I finish these drawings, I always post a 10-second time lapse so you can see start to finish if you don't have the patience to sit around and watch me draw in real time. I'm always happy to answer art questions or music questions or anything that overlaps with any of my career. Basically anything. Related to any of the creative stuff that's on my YouTube page. Also happy to answer questions about drawing materials, whether it's a paper or pencils, pens. I have kind of an overwhelming collection of pens and pencils and different drawing books and paint supplies and all that stuff, so I can give a pretty good review or suggestions if you're looking to get into drawing, or if you're looking for different tools for different purposes. I can answer a lot of those questions. I used to work in a store that sold a lot of it as well. And like I said before, if you have someone that preferably is recognizable and kind of in line with what I draw, if you think I should do a portrait of them, comment somewhere. Pretty much any of my videos are good to comment on. I'll see all of it. Like I said before, I do have a list of people that I'm drawing, and I'm about to start a second series in a smaller book, so I'll be doing 2 different series at a time. But if there's someone you'd like to see me draw, let me know. Please don't ask for me to do pre-portraits of like commission things. If you do want to commission something, you can contact me through my website. It's linked everywhere. Or holler at me on Instagram. I do commissions, but I don't do them for free. So. Also, if you're interested in buying any of the drawings that I've done here, they are all for sale. Eventually I will have them in a gallery on my website, appropriately priced. And then I will have prints available of most of my portraits. I don't have a timeline on that because I'm still looking for the exact right process. Because a lot of like the detail and the quality of them is sort of lost in a lot of printing processes. But the prints will be more affordable in various sizes. The one-of-ones, like the actual original art, is a little bit higher priced because they are unique pieces. So, and you can actually watch me create all of them in the playlists that are on there. channel, so I'm not trying to sell you a class. Really not even trying to sell you art, it's just, if people are curious, it's there. You can buy it. Okay, I'm gonna call it there for the day. It's 2 hours of drawing. I'll be back on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, West Coast time. I'll put final touches on this tomorrow, and then I will start another portrait from this list that I'm working through. If you have any suggestions of someone you'd like to see me draw, comment in any of my videos. If you want to see like daily live drawing or ask art questions, subscribe. And thanks for watching. All right, see you tomorrow at 10.